Hi, Dom. Thank you for joining us today. Could you please introduce yourself and Nutanix?
Thank you, Beck. It's great to be here and appreciate the time spent with you and the team. My name is Dom Poloniecki, and I am the General Manager for Nutanix in Western Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa. What we do in Nutanix for our customers is we help them take out costs, mitigate risk, and reduce complexity by automating IT and business processes through software.
So what is the latest news at Nutanix?
Couple of big things that are going on in our industry and in particular affecting financial services. One is around, what's going in terms of, I guess, the digital arms race for all the financial services organizations, whether you're a big gorilla who's been here for 300 years or you're, smaller and more agile FinTech type company. It's about, getting to digital first and fastest and being agile. So we're helping customers do that, particularly in this multi-cloud era. And there's some recent offerings in that space. And then we're going to talk today a little bit more in detail around how we're helping customers with data and effectively, like I said up front about what we do, helping customers automate a lot of their processes so they can get faster access to data, help them monetize that data faster and deliver business value for their organizations.
So what are the drivers behind Era 2.0 and what benefits are your customers realizing?
Actually, just last night, I was out to dinner with the CIO of a very large bank in Nigeria and was explaining what Era does. And the way I described it to him was, do you know AWS? Answer, yes. Do you know RDS on AWS, which is Amazon's relational database service on the public cloud environment? To which the answer is yes, I know what RDS is. Well, think of Era as RDS on premise, but it's a platform for any database and anywhere because we can deploy it also into the public cloud. So we support any kind of core database, whether that's an Oracle, SQL, MySQL, Postgres, SAP HANA, all on a single platform. So it's this concept of automating your database provisioning, building it once, deploying it anywhere, all from a single platform.
Financial services organizations have had to advance their digital transformation plans due to the pandemic. How is Nutanix and its technology assisting them?
It's been an extraordinary year, hasn't it? And every industry and every organization, has had to adapt and go through probably more change than they've ever seen in their existence, or certainly for a long time. So it's clearly been, very, very significant for everyone. The first thing I always say when I'm asked that question is to the IT industry is well done, right? Because I'm sure you're at home right now. I'm at home as well, hence the background. We've all had to very, very quickly adapt to getting our workforce to work remotely and do that whilst maintaining continuity of service and business to our customers. And I've got to say, the industry has done phenomenally well to keep the lights on. And I think it's shone the light on IT operations and IT departments on what an amazing service they deliver for their organizations. So from our perspective, we, as I said earlier, we were 11 years in existence. The first killer app that we came to market with to automate, through hyperconverged infrastructure, which is the core of what we do, was VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. So, when kind of February, March kicked in, we've been very, very busy helping our customers effectively get their workforce connected remotely, whether that's in the cloud through a product we have called Frame, or whether that's helping them optimize their environments to deliver VDI from the core data center remotely into everybody's homes. So that's been extremely busy for us. Fortunate from a business perspective that we're in a good space. The sector's a good place to be at the moment, and our part of the sector is clearly seeing a lot of growth. What we're kind of seeing now, Beck, is two things related to to remote working VDI. You sort of step one was, we've got to get everybody operational really quickly, which, part of it was let's just get loads of laptops and we've got to get Teams up and running or Zoom and all of that. And now it's been about, okay, well, some organizations were ready for that and had built proper VDI environments that were optimized to deliver that remote desktop environment, any apps, anywhere. And some organizations less so. So they're kind of coming to us now to say, okay, we've kept the lights on, but how do we optimize this environment and give a great end user experience? And that's where we can help them with, both Frame in the public cloud and our core end user compute VDI platform. And we partner with many of the top providers you expect, like Citrix as an example. So that's kind of part one. And part two, in particular in financial services that we see, pandemic related, is what started out as clearly a massive health crisis has now become, financial crisis, an economic crisis for the world, and of course, for this particular sector. So most of what we do when we automate in software is we take out cost. So, there's a lot of conversations and engagements and business that we're doing with our customers right now is to help them dramatically take out cost of their operations by automating through our various software solutions. So long answer to a short question.
Are the main trends that prevailed prior to the pandemic still in place?
Yeah, I think to a large degree they are in financial services, and we've talked a little bit about some of them, about this digital arms race, and probably some of them have been accelerated. In fact, certainly some of them have been accelerated as a consequence of the pandemic. I talked to some banks recently, who not necessarily by design, but out of necessity, have been spinning up new services, post-pandemic, and actually the tolerance for being able to deliver a new service and a new application in a matter of weeks is much improved. And I think this sort of more digital, more agile, approach to delivering web-based services and new services that financial services are taking to market is really exciting for the industry. Clearly, as I said earlier, there is ever more focus on taking out cost, because clearly everybody is experiencing some significant headwinds, or certainly many are. And the cloud piece, which I know we'll come on to talk to, is again seeing a massive acceleration. So out of necessity, by in terms of increased capacity needed as we've gone through the pandemic, we've seen a lot of organizations move workloads to the cloud, perhaps faster than they were originally intending, and that's broadly been a good thing. But I think the sort of remedial work is to address, have we done that in a way that was thoughtful? Have we thought about how we are refactoring our applications to really benefit from some of those web-based services, or native cloud services, I should say? And now we've done that big kind of immediate knee-jerk shift. What do we need to do to optimize for the cloud? So I think the cloud dynamic is a really interesting and exciting one, and probably in FS more than any other sector.
So do you see the pandemic changing the dynamic in financial services between some of the more established players and the FinTech organizations?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting observation, Beck, and clearly, like any industry, at the moment, there's going to be a lot of headwinds that financial services organizations are facing, some of whom will be going through existential crises at the moment. So, for the first part, it'll be about survival, and some of the smaller, let's say more challenger banks, FinTech organizations, may have may face some, cash flow headwinds and some survival issues, where some of the more established banks with more significant asset bases may have, I guess, a better ability to weather that storm. But I think the interesting bit is around what we were talking about earlier, which is this, digital arms race or digital transformation, whatever you want to call it. And I think the pandemic has forced some of the more established organizations to digitize faster and help them realize that actually it is possible, and you don't need to wait 18 months to deliver a new service, a new banking service. What's interesting in talking to banks, we actually run a regular CIO, CTO roundtable with some of the biggest global banks, and we talk about some of these issues that they're facing, and one of which is around that exact point is, how do we digitize fast? How do we take some of our more legacy applications that are more kind of ledger-based applications and actually make them more cloud native, and is it worth doing that? Is it worth the cost associated with doing that? And basically driven by the fact that we kind of have to do that to survive against some of the fintechs that are a lot more agile and don't carry some of that technical debt. And I think we've seen through the pandemic that the bigger players are able to come to market with services way faster than maybe they could in the past, just really out of necessity, which is easy when you're, or easier, I should say, when you're bringing out a new service. You obviously deliver a cloud first, API driven model. We've seen some really interesting news just in the last week or so from Goldman Sachs, who have just launched their banking as a service offering, and made that open API to their developer marketplace. So we're going to see a lot of the bigger banks, I think, opening up some of their services to a wider base, to bring more innovation to their customers. But the real challenge, which is where we think we can help, is how do you accelerate that migration to public cloud, such that you are really making and taking advantage of some of those cloud native services, and we effectively have a software based solution to doing that, which enable, effectively we would wrap a software shim around your existing applications, enable you to migrate those applications, kind of lift and shift seamlessly from on-prem into the cloud. And then it's about working out how do you kind of splinter up that application and start chunking it up into elements of it that you want to make cloud native. For instance, take my application server and work out how I can make that a cloud-based service instead of the legacy piece. So I think that there's a really interesting opportunity around what the pandemic has brought to help accelerate some of that cloud migration. And we have an offering called Clusters, which we GA'd on Amazon Web Services, and we've announced our intention to do the same with Azure, which effectively gives customers that seamless extension from their on-premise environment into public cloud natively, bare metal on AWS, and then, as I said, GAing hopefully next year with Azure. So I think we can really accelerate and help enable some of the banks to to accelerate that shift even faster, and, as I said, start to win that digital arms race against some of the more agile, smaller, more nimble fintech organizations.
So lastly, what is next for Nutanix and the fintech industry?
So yeah, a couple of observations, kind of building on some of the things we've talked about, and maybe just to deep dive a little bit in one of our solution announcements, which we touched on, Era 2.0. So we maybe unpack that a little bit. So what's the problem we're trying to solve there for financial services, and why are we seeing a sudden rapid adoption from some of the largest global banks around our Era offering? Again, it's driven by that piece that I said about agility and cost, and I know those are big buzzwords that you'll hear from every IT vendor. But talking about data and database, which is kind of really the core issue, I guess, we're trying to address here with Era. Every service that a bank comes to market with, has a sort of common denominator associated with it. There is an application, there's a web server, and there's a database. And really at the heart of everything is the data associated with that application. the information embedded within it that's effectively being monetized by the bank in delivering that core service. So that makes that kind of really at the heart of everything that a bank is trying to deliver. But one of the challenges that we see among many is that just the pure proliferation of that data. And I use that an example of, I'm sure you like everybody watching uses WhatsApp. You imagine that scenario where you're sending a picture to a group of friends on a WhatsApp group. Let's say there's 10 friends on the group. You've got one copy of the photo, you send it to 10 friends, they get a copy loaded on their phone, you've made 10 copies of that photo. And that kind of scenario exists in the world of data in any industry, but in particular in banking, where there are typically a very, very large amount of databases to support the business. And that sort of copy scenario, we call it copy data management, it drives an enormous amount of inefficiency, time, i.e. slowing down time to market, and more importantly, slowing down the ability to monetize that data, and cost, because there's a cost associated with storing that data, managing that data, upgrading and patching the associated databases that are storing that data. So what we're trying to address in ERA 2.0, in part, among other things, is that sort of inefficiency. So in automating a lot of those processes and software, we help banks go to market quicker. So if you talk to a bank, and we have done, and we've had third parties talk to banks on our behalf about, for instance, deploying an Oracle RAC cluster when the business has requested a database provisioning exercise. Typically in a very large bank, it's taking 3 to 5 weeks. And the reason it's taking 3 to 5 weeks is because when you have requested a database from your database administration team, that process is then split across multiple teams. So split across your database team, your storage team, compute, networking, backup team. And the splitting of that process just builds on the overall time and agility to deliver that service. So that's kind of point one. And then there's this issue around, this copy data management, taking multiple copies of that data and database as it's being spun around those different teams, or indeed your QA and test teams, your analytics team, your development team. And so if you can, through an automation platform, in our case, ERA 2.0, automate a lot of those processes and software, so you don't need 5 teams to deliver that process, then you can dramatically reduce the time to market on delivering that database. So from weeks in that particular example to minutes. And that's exactly what some of these large banks are seeing, from ERA 2.0. And we don't require that copy data, the multiple copies of databases that drives that significant cost. So, you talk to someone like an IDC and they'll say, for every production database in a financial services organization, you've got about 10 copies. And on average, a large bank will have 200 production databases. That's 2,000 copies of the databases, and the proliferation associated with that, has significant cost and inefficiency associated with it. So, so that's kind of been a big part of what we're coming to market with here. The other interesting thing for those that haven't heard of us in Nutanix is, 2 of the very large global systems integrators, HCL and Wipro, have built their own offerings around Nutanix ERA. In the case of Wipro, it's called DDS, which is Digital Database Services, and HCL's equivalent offering is called Skate. And so for us, that's a great endorsement in the quality of the product. It's great to have really excellent partners like Wipro and HCL, building upon our platform and helping us take it out to market globally. So yeah, that's kind of summarizing in part what ERA does for our customers. And there's some exciting things coming up around cloud and multi-cloud that maybe we can come on to later.